Hello, everybody. I am the Warped Adventurer. Today we're back with another deck tech on Svella Ice Shaper. And so the goal of this deck is we want to make a whole bunch of mana rocks with Svella, and then we start activating him every turn and get some really expensive stuff out and have fun with it. Um, so let's start with ramp as usual. Again, the more basic sort of ramp and move on from there. So first up, we have Soul Ring, pretty clear. Then Arcane Signet, Mind Stone. We got Tireless Provisioner, which whenever land ETBs under your control, create a food or treasure token. Then we got Rishkar, Pima Renegade. When he enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures. Each creature you control with a counter on it has tap at a green. And so he just over time gets you a decent amount of mana. At the very least, he's 3 for 2 mana every turn, which is rather nice. Um, Next up we have a Sakura Tribuilder. Steve. Um, he's just 1/1, sack him, fetch a basic to field tap, then shuffle. He's in most green decks, so it's pretty expected. Next up we have Cultivate to fetch 2 basics, one to field tap, the other to hand. And then an interesting one, we got Xenagos the Reveler. You can +1 him to add X mana in any combination of red and or green, where X is a number of creatures you control. And he can 0 to create a 2/2 red and green satyr creature token with haste. And his -6 is exile the top 7 cards of your library. You may put any number of creature and or land cards from among them onto the battlefield. Generally, you don't ult him, though if you happen to be at 7 and nobody's doing anything about it, pretty good. But generally, both his up and his 0 ability are both extremely nice, so you don't even need to bother worrying about ulting him. Um, just try and keep him alive and he'll do great work for you. Moving on, we have token-based stuff. First things first, we got Kazandu Tusk Caller. It's a level up creature, so you could pay 2 to put a level counter on her, and 2 through 5, she could tap to create a 3/3 elephant, and level 6 plus, you could tap to create 2 3/3 elephants. Sorry, and so just over time can get you quite a bit of power on board. Granted, it is level 6 you start getting the elephants, but over time that won't really matter how much levels it takes. Next up, you got Chitter Spitter. Cost 3 for an artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice a token. If you do, put an acorn counter on Chitter Spitter. Squirrels you control get +1/+1 for each acorn counter on Chitter Spitter, and you can pay green, tap it to create a squirrel. So just over time, it's going to be creating more and more squirrels that are getting bigger and bigger. And there's like one other thing in here that creates squirrels. So you can do some stuff with them, but it's mainly in here because it makes quite big squirrels. Next up, we got Determined Iteration. At the beginning of combat on your turn, populate. The token created this way gains haste and sack it at the beginning of the next end step. So it's pretty clear. Basically, you're gonna be most of the time you're just gonna create another another icy manolith with the populate, and so there you go. Or you can populate a creature token if you need to, but most of the time it'll be the icy manoliths that Svella creates. Next up, we got Peregrine Took. 3 for a 2/3. If one or more tokens would be created under your control, those tokens plus an additional food token are created instead, and you can sacrifice 3 food to draw a card. That's just really nice. Every time you make an icy manolith, you also get a food. And so over time, you can either gain some life to recover from some heavy hits, or just sacrifice him later for some card draw. He's super helpful, and in this kind of deck, you're going to be creating a decent amount of tokens, whether a creature or not. He does not care. Moving on, we have Mycoloth. This card was removed from Marin, or yeah, this one was removed from Marin and put into here. I finally decided that Marin didn't need that. She had plenty of ways to create her own tokens without it. So, we got Mycoloth in here. I already explained him before, so I won't explain him again here. If you really want to know what he does, you could look him up, or you could go look at my previous video, Marin of Clan Neltoth Deck Talk. This time, we're not going to worry about him. Next up, we have the heavy hitting spells that you want to hit off of Svella's 8 cost ability. And so, first up, we have Colossification. It's a 7 cost enchantment aura. Enchant creature. When it enters battlefield, tap enchanted creature. Enchant creature gets plus 20/20. He gets a massive buff, and it taps him so you can't swing immediately. But if you were to say, I don't know, put that on Agatha of the Vile Cauldron, now all your activated abilities cost 20 less to activate. Can't reduce it to less than 1, but in other words, all of your activated abilities just cost a colorless and whatever colored mana. In other words, you can pay a red and a green to activate Svella's look at the top 4 cards ability instead of paying 8. It makes it extremely nice. And also, if you really need to, you could pop it on a trampled creature and have a threat on board to draw attention away from your other stuff, really. Next up, this wouldn't be the best hit, but it's still a really good card, so it's still nice to hit. It's Quartzwood Crasher. It's a 6/6 for 5. It has trample, and whenever one or more creatures you control with trample deal combat damage to a player, create an XX green dinosaur beast creature token with trample, where X is the amount of damage those creatures dealt to that player. You punch people with tramplers really, really hard, and you make a really, really big trampler to punch people really hard again and make an even bigger trampler. I think that's pretty clear why it's in here. And there's plenty of tramplers in here by default, so could be bigger than just the 6/6. Next up is Tovalar's Huntmaster. He's a 6/6. When he enters the battlefield, create 2 wolves, and he has Daybound. So on his other side, so when it becomes night, he flips to this side. And Tovalar's Pack Leader. He's a 7/7, and when he enters the battlefield or attacks, create 2/2 green wolf creature tokens, and you can pay 4 to make another wolf or werewolf you control fight target creature you don't control. Now I have a wolf deck, and I'll probably show you guys it here soon in one of these upcoming videos. And I just had quite a few Tovalar's Huntmasters, so I spread them out through my green decks because I really like him. He's a 6/6 and enters and creates you 2 more wolves, so 10 power for 6. And on his other side, he'll create you more wolves. Really nice. Next up is Engulfing Slagworm. It's a 7/7 for 7. Whenever it blocks or becomes blocked by a creature, destroy that creature. You gain life equal to that creature's toughness. So, in other words, it's a massive creature, and if you put trample on it, if someone tries to block with any number of creatures, you just blow them all up. And you gain life for all of them. And and it still punches through because it has trample. It's disgusting. So it's a really nice card. It isn't in like the game enders because I wouldn't say it's really a game ender, but it surely is dangerous. Next up is Grook's Horde. It's a 7/7 for 7, has trample. You play with the top card of your library revealed. You may cast the top card of your library if it's a creature card. So, sure, your opponents see what you're drawing, but also it lets you play creatures from the top too, and it itself is a big old creature, and it lets you see what's coming up next, so you know whether you want to activate Svella or not. Even if it's not like something great on top, you still might activate Svella because he looks at top three, well, top four cards, not just the top one. So he's really nice. Will say, kind of wish it was you may look at the top card of your library, not reveal it. So there's that. Next up is Ashaya, Soul of the Wild. She's a star for 5. Her power and toughness are each equal to the number of lands you control. And non-token creatures you control are forest lands in addition to their other types. So this one is more for the ramp sort of part of it, but also it's a massive creature, so there's that too. There isn't many landfall effects like that last deck I made a video about, but I still popped her in here because, like I said, the more ramp in this deck, the better. Next up is Nessian Wild's Ravager. 6 for a 6/6, has Tribute 6. So, as this creature enters the battlefield, an opponent of your choice may place 6/1/1 counters on it. If they don't, you may have Nessian Wild's Ravager fight another target creature. It enters battlefield, can get turned into a 12/12, or it can take out an opponent's creature that's having an issue that you're having an issue with. It's all around really nice. Not the best Hydra, of course, not by a long shot, but still a good one. Next up, you have Atali Primal Storm. 6 for 6/6. Whenever he attacks, exile the top card of each player's library, then you may cast any number of non-land cards exiled this way without paying their mana cost. Fun all around here. He swings, you get a bunch of cards from the top. If they're lands, sad day, but also, if they're not, you can cast them all. It's really nice. It can get you more creatures. And if you have the Grook sword out and you don't like this thing on top, you can swing with a Tolly to get rid of it. Next up, you have Aggressive Mammoth. 6 for an 8/8 trample. Other creatures you control have trample. It's really nice. It's 6 for an 8/8, which is always really good. It has trample itself, and it gives all your other stuff trample. It's one of the better things that just give all your stuff trample, in my opinion. Not as good as Archetype of Aggression, but it's still really good. Next up, we have Sandworm Convergence. It's 8 mana for an enchantment. Creatures with flying can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. It just stops flyers from swinging at you and your stuff altogether. And at the beginning of your end step, create a 5/5 green worm creature token. And it dumps out big creatures on your turn, so it's really good. Next up is, speaking of worms, it's Impervious Great Worm. It costs 10 mana, has Convoke, so your creatures can help cast it. It's a 16/16 indestructible. So, it's massive, and its picture is literally the worm eating a town. It is just nom and wrecking the place. So it's a really good card. Next up, you have Giant Ataphage. 7 for a 7/7 trample. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of Giant Ataphage. It's a 7/7 trample, so that's really good. It only costs 7, so that's nice. And every time it hits a player, you create another Giant Ataphage. And every time that token copy hits a player, you create another. And so it goes from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, 16 to 32, and by that time, everyone's probably dead if they didn't deal with it by then. Next up, we have clear one. We got Hornet Queen. 7 for a 2/2 flying death touch, and when she enters the battlefield, create 4 1/1 flying 1/1 green insect creature tokens with flying and death touch. It's really nice. It comes out and it creates you 4 more flying death touchers. It itself is a flying death toucher, and so it creates you Air Force One on a stick. You just drop it, immediate flying field to block with, and it can also fly over and start poking people for 6 damage every turn, which is also really nice. But generally, you're going to be holding it back to scare off all the big dragons. Who knew? A bunch of hornets could take out a dragon. One hornet could take out a dragon, for that matter. Next up, we have Hunting Pack. Cost 7, it's an instant. Create a 4/4 green beast creature token, and it has Storm, so you copy it for each spell cast before it this turn. So you cast it on somebody else's turn who just popped off with a whole bunch of spells they cast, and you fill up your own board with a bunch of 4/4s because they popped off. Or you can cast it while someone's swinging before you declare blockers, so you create like 4 or 5 4/4s, and then you have immediate block force. Next up, we have Terror of Mount Velis. He costs 7 for a 5/5 flying double strike. When he enters battlefield, creatures you control gain double strike until end of turn. So if you have the aggressive mammoth out, and then you drop Terror of Mount Velis, so you fill your entire board, all your whole board becomes double strikers. They have trample, and yeah, so you swing in and probably swing for game, honestly, especially if you're swinging with like 3 giant Ataphages, because then they have double strike, and so if even 1 damage gets through from each, then the double strike damage would still hit through, so you'd get 2 for each giant Ataphage. It's really nice. Then this one's a little debatable because it seems a little tree folk focused, and there's not a lot of tree folk in this. However, the last one is all I care about. It's 7 for a 4/10. Tree folk you control have vigilance, so it's basically a 4/10 vigilance. Whenever one or more tree folk you control attack, add twice that much green, so 2 green, and you don't lose unspent green mana as steps and phases end. So you can just fill up if you can dump the rest of your green mana that you haven't spent yet into your mana pool, and then it sticks around. And next turn you have a bunch of extra mana when your lands and stuff on tap. So it's basically like putting your mana aside for later turns and still having the lands still in tap. So it's like doubling your mana, sort of. Next up, we have the cheaters, the cheat pile, that sort of stuff. First, we got Plarg and Nasari. 5 for a 5/4. At the beginning of your upkeep, each player exiles the top card of their library until they exile a non-land card. An opponent chooses a non-land card exiled this way. You may cast up to 2 spells from among the other cards exiled this way without paying their mana costs. Notably, the cards that they exile don't go back to the bottom, and so it'll exile the lands, and the lands will just stay exiled. And if you don't cast some of the stuff, that stuff also stays exiled. So keep that in mind. Next up, we have Arnie Metalbrow. 3 for 3/3 whenever a creature you control attacks, or a creature entering the battlefield under your control attacking, you may pay 2 mana. If you do, you may put a creature card with mana value less than that creature's mana value from your hand onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. That may sound confusing, but basically, let's say um, Impervious Great Worm is attacking. I could pay 2 extra mana to bring out. Um, let's bring out the. Let's bring out Giant Ataphage onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking. Then I could pay 2 more to bring out Aggressive Mammoth, tapped and attacking. Then I could pay 2 more because this dude entered tapped and attacking. I could pay 2 more to pop a Shia Soul of the Wild out, tapped and attacking. And then maybe pay 2 more if you somehow have another like that to pop Bloodspore Thrynax onto the battlefield tapped and attacking. Sacrifice like 10 tokens to give him 10/1/1 counters. And because of that, he has trample, so he's a 12/12 trample. Then, yeah, that is super good if you didn't catch on. But yeah, the Ornamental Brow can get disgusting if you have enough mana and if you have enough cards in hand. Next up, though, we have Rampage of the Clans. 4 for an instant, destroy all artifacts and enchantments. For each permanent destroyed this way, its controller creates a 3/3 green centaur creature token. So yeah, if by the end game when you have like 12 icy manaliths and maybe your mana rocks out, stuff like that, you can cast Rampage the Clans to turn them into 12 3/3s for just any time. Or if someone's about to destroy all your artifacts anyway, you can respond with Rampage of the Clans to just turn them all into creatures. Keep in mind, it also turns your opponent's artifacts and enchantments into creatures, but more often than not, that's a good thing because they won't have as many as you do because you're kind of focused on creating them with Svella, where they probably won't be just by the odds of it. So yeah, really, really nice. Next up is A Glimpse of Tomorrow. It's a sorcery. You cannot cast it normally. You have to pay two red to suspend it for 3. So in 3 turns you cast it. When it is cast, you shuffle all permanents you own into your library, then reveal that many cards from the top of your library, and put all non-aura permanent cards revealed this way onto the battlefield. Then do the same for aura cards. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. So, yeah, you can turn your entire board if you're just not hitting the right stuff, or if most of your board is tokens, turn all that and just shuffle it in and dump a bunch of stuff on the field. Keep in mind, it also shuffles away your lands, so do this when you're about to try and go for game. Because if you're not careful, you won't be able to continue doing anything else. It'll probably give you some lands back, but probably not as many as you had. Unless you get really unlucky and it gives you a whole lot of lands, in which case, ouch. Next up, we have the more versatile cards. And first on that list is Return of the Wild Speaker. 5 for an instant, choose one. You can either draw cards equal to greatest power among non-human creatures you control, or non-human creatures you control get +3/+3 until end of turn. So, yeah, basically, if you're about to swing for game, you can give all your stuff a +3/+3 buff. Or if you just are running low on cards in hand and you want more, you can fill up your hand. Super nice. Next up, we have Verdant Command. Cost 2 for an instant. Choose 2. Target player creates 2 tapped green squirrel creature tokens. You could counter target loyalty ability of a planeswalker, exile target card from a graveyard, or target player gains 3 life. This is one of the most versatile green instants I've ever seen because if you want to be basic, it could create 2 some 1/1s, or it could counter an ultimate ability from a planeswalker. Or if someone's about to return a scary card from their graveyard, you can respond by exiling it, or you can gain yourself life, or you can gain someone else life. It's just so good, and you could choose 2, and just like most other commands, and it just is super helpful. Next up, we got cast triggers. So let's start with the obvious ones and move on from there. We got Forgotten Ancient. Whenever a player casts a spell, it gets a 1/1 counter, and on your upkeep, you can maneuver counters from it onto other creatures. Then we got Beast Whisperer. Cast a creature, you draw a card, and it costs 4 for a 2/3. Then we got Life Crafter's Bestiary. You on your upkeep, you scry 1, so that helps with Svella, so you can maybe pitch away cards on top that you don't like before you activate Svella. So there you go. Or you can, whenever you cast a creature spell, you can pay a green. If you do, draw a card. Extra card draw in here is really nice because it lets you fill up your hand with stuff you'll want, and then you can activate Svella to get some stuff on field, and then with your extra mana, you can dump stuff from your hand onto field, so you're not just limited to activating Svella and hoping for something. Next up, we have Silverback Elder. It's 5 for a 5/7. Whenever you cast a creature spell, choose 1. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. Look at the top 5 cards of your library. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield, put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. Or you can gain 4 life. Now that's every time you cast a creature spell, and you can do the same one as much as you like. Super helpful, super reliable, and if you need lands, it can ramp you. If you need life, it can gain you life. And if you need to take out some scary artifacts or enchantments, it can do that too. Super helpful, super versatile, great. Next up, we have Primordial Sage. It's 6 for 4/5. Whenever you cast a creature spell, draw a card. Again, a lot of card draw in here, or at least a decent amount of card draw. I wouldn't say a lot. And so it's pretty clear why that's in here. Next up, we got Sweet Gum Recluse. It's 6 for a 0/3. It has Flash and Cascade and Reach. Cascade means when you cast it, you exile cards to the top of your library until you hit a non-land card that costs less than it. You may cast the non-land card without paying its mana cost. And then, when Sweet Gum Recluse enters battlefield, put 3 1/1 counters on each of any number of target creatures that entered the battlefield this turn. So you can cast it to go hope for maybe some ramp or for one of your planeswalkers or something like that. And it'll also buff up maybe a whole bunch of tokens you had enter this turn or anything like that. And it also turns itself into a 3/6 reach to block those pesky flyers. Next up, Vivian Monster's Advocate. She's 5 for a planeswalker. You may look at the top card of your library at any time, and you may cast creature spells from the top of your library. Her +1 ability creates a 3/3 beast with your choice of a vigilance counter or reach counter or trample counter. So there we go. -2, when you cast your next creature spell this turn, search your library for a creature card with lesser converted mana cost, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. That is amazingly helpful. So after you activate her, -R2, then you activate Svella, and you know what's on top. So if like an 8 cost creature like your or your 10 cost Impervious Great Worm, you cast that with Svella, then you can choose basically any other creature in your deck, and it comes directly to field. Super nice. And she can create some 3/3 beasts to protect herself that can also have reach or vigilance, which is really nice. Next up, we have a little bit of counter focus, which 2 cards. It's not really counter focus. I just wasn't sure where else to put them. First up, we got Rubble Built Raiders. Cost 4 for a 3/3, and whenever it attacks, put a 1/1 counter on it for each attacking creature you control. So every time it attacks, it gets bigger and bigger. So there you go. Then we got Bloodspore Thrinax. 4 for a 2/2 that has Devour once. When it enters, sacrifice any number of creatures, put that many counters on it. And each other creature you control ETBs with an additional X11 counters on it, where X number of counters on Bloodsport Thrinax. It's dangerous, scary. It was in Marin, so you guys get the point. Next up is stuff that goes well with the commander. First things first, Leyline Immersion. Cost 4 for an enchant aura. Enchant legendary creature. Enchant creature has ward 2 and tap add 5 mana in any combination of colors. Spend this mana only to cast spells. Cannot activate abilities with it. Super nice. I could protect one of your legendaries, and if you put on something other than Svella, it's even better because you can tap this one for mana, still activate Svella to look at the top 4 and cast a spell from among them. Use that mana to cast another spell from your hand. It's really nice. Next up, we got Bard class. So level 1 is legendary creatures enter the battlefield. Legendary creatures you control enter the battlefield with an additional 1/1 counter on them. You could pay a red and a green to level it up to level 2. Legendary spells you cast cost a red and a green less to cast. This effect only reduces the amount of colored mana you pay. And if you pay another 5 to level it from 2 to 3, when you cast a legendary spell, exile the top 2 cards of your library. You may play them this turn. The idea of this deck is you want to continue casting stuff and you want more and more stuff on the field, and so you want more and more access to more stuff you can cast. Because you're going to have so much mana, you want stuff to do with it. And so having impulse card draw is super nice in here, and reducing mana lets you continue casting stuff, and casting legendary lets you exile top 2 to cast more stuff, possibly hit another legendary to look more to cast. Super, super great. Then Agatha of the Vile Cauldron, probably the best one in this deck besides Svella, because she costs a red and green. So uh, if you have Bard class at level 2, you cast her for free. She's a 1/1. Activated abilities of creatures you control cost X less to activate, where X is Agatha of the Vile Cauldron's power. This effect can't reduce the amount can't reduce the mana and the cost to less than 1. Sorry, that was told very poorly. Basically, her activated abilities cost X less, where X is her power. Can't be less than 1. So if she's big enough, Svella could 1 colorless tap to create a mana token that taps for 1. So it's 1 to create another 1. It's great. Or you could pay 2 to cast a spell for free. It's great. Agatha is so great. She's amazing and awesome. She also has pay 6 mana. Other creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample and haste until end of turn. So that's also really nice. Because after an explosive turn, you pay 2 mana because she's going to reduce it to 2 mana eventually. And buff your field for 1/1, give it trample and haste. So all this stuff you just dropped can swing immediately. So they're going to have to deal with it now. not next turn. It's amazing. Next up, we have mana soakers, places where you can soak your extra mana into. First up, we have Escape to the Wilds. Cost 5. Exile the top 5 cards of your library. You may play cards exiled this way until the end of your next turn, and you may play an additional land this turn. So you play this, you get 5 cards that you can cast this turn and next turn. You can play an additional land, so it ramps you. It's super versatile, and it gives you an extra place to soak your mana into. Get some extra cards on the field. Next up, we got Splitting Slime. 5 for a 3/3 that has Monstrosities 3. So we haven't seen Monstrosity in a while, but you pay 6 mana. If this creature isn't monstrous, put 3/1/1 counters on it, and it becomes monstrous. When it becomes monstrous, you cannot make it become monstrous again. When Splitting Slime becomes monstrous, put a token onto the battlefield that's a copy of Splitting Slime. So basically, you play it, then you can pay 6 to give 3/1/1 counters, turning it into a 6/6. Then it'll create another 3/3 that you can pay 6 to turn it into a 6/6 to create another 3/3. And so it just gives you a permanent place to soak mana into. Then we got the game enders, the win cons, the whatever you wants to calls them. First up, Warstorm Surge. Yes. Then Tree Shaker Chimera. 8/5 for 7. All creatures able to block it do so, and when it dies, you draw 3 cards. So this is a game ender because when it swings with something else, a player is probably going to die because all their stuff has to block this, meaning it can't block the other stuff. And so you swing with this and enough to kill that player besides this, and they're dead, and maybe throw some extra stuff to other players. Next up, End Raise Forerunners. Yeah, it's a pretty well-known one, so I'm not going to bother with it. But yeah, it's super good, super obvious why it's in here, and it's Vigilance, Trample, and Haste, so that's ridiculous. And it's a 7/7. Yeah. Next up is Azuri's Predation. I consider this one a semi-board wipe, but I didn't want to put it in the board wipe category because it also just dumps out a whole bunch of beasts and it takes out a whole bunch of your opponent's creatures. And so that's just really nice. So it costs 8. And for each creature your opponents control, create a 4/4 green Phyrexian Beast creature token. Each of those tokens fights a different one of those creatures. Basically, any creatures with toughness 4 or less your opponents control die, and you get a whole bunch of beasts to field that most of them will live, and you will be able to beat people really, really hard. And finally, moving on to the non-basic lands, you got Command Tower. You got Mossfire Valley. Pay colors, tap at a red and a green. Yep. And then you got Game Trail. Enters battlefield. You may reveal a mountain or forest. If you don't, it enters tapped. Then you got Raging Ravine. Enters tapped, and you can tap it to add a red or a green. Or you could pay 4 to turn it into a 3/3 red and green elemental creature with whenever it attacks, put a 1/1 counter on it. It's still land, and it's only till end of turn. So yeah, this has been my Svella Ice Shaper deck. It's a newer deck, and I've been taking apart a lot of decks recently and building them, building new ones, turning them into brand new stuff. I love building decks. So I have a brand new set of decks to show off to you guys and explain how I build them. Basically, a quick breakdown. This deck, early game, you're gonna be ramping yourself with your you just want to get as many ramp out as quick as possible and use those ramp to activate Svella to get more ramp out. So by the time you get to like mid game, you already have a good like 12 or 13 mana at the ready. So you could activate Svella, get something expensive out, maybe cast another thing, and kick things off as quick as you can. And also perhaps build a board to withstand the crackback because there's gonna be crackback. Excuse me. I think all Gruul decks should be built to withstand the crackback because I notice a lot of Gruul decks they get super big, super scary, and then they get targeted out of the game. And they can't handle taking on three different people at once. So you need to try and build your Gruul decks no matter what they're trying to do. Gruul almost always wants to make big creatures. Making big creatures scares people. You're probably going to become arch enemy. So you need to build your deck to withstand the crackback. And after you do that, then and you build the withstanding crackback to focus on your deck, of course, like Azuri's Predation. It costs 8, so you could cheat it out with Svella, that sort of stuff. But you want board wipes, you want removal, you want that sort of stuff. I'm not going to say people play more removal. That's an obvious thing. It's pretty demeaning and annoying at this point. Everyone says it. It's like a catchphrase at this point, but it's a true statement. Um, and you need just maybe add a little bit of tokens into all your decks because tokens are really good at blocking, and that helps withstand crackback. And any decks that have blue, add a little bit of counter spells. Counter spells help you withstand crackback. Removal does, board wipes, that sort of stuff. And yeah, I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have, leave a like. If you would like, of course, leave a like if you like. And think about subscribing. This has been the Warped Adventure on the Svella Deck Talk. Stay safe, stay healthy, peace out.